We are Southeastern 16 as we got you covered on all things SEC football. Big one Saturday afternoon in Knoxville. Alabama makes the road trip to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Third Saturday in October. We'll talk about it with Cory Reamer, former Alabama linebacker. Right after we tell you about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform. Number one source for everything sports betting, every stat, matchup breakdown, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. They've got the largest catalog of odds from everything football, MLB playoffs going on right now, NHL, NBA, two political props. When the game's over, you can go to the online casino. They've got blackjack and poker and over 150 slots games. So head over to their website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here. All right, Cory, big rivalry game, Alabama-Tennessee. You've played in some of these. It's a big one for not only the teams, for the fan base, third Saturday in October.
Yeah, this is one that always has meant a ton to Alabama fans, to Tennessee fans. This is a rivalry that, some argue is bigger than others that a lot of fans consider. This is an old school rivalry that goes back a long ways. And this year just seems like there's more on the line for both of these teams. Going into the season, most people probably expected both of these teams to be undefeated coming into this game. Real implications on what the SEC, who's going to win the SEC, trying to, play for that automatic bid, get that first round bye in the playoffs. But here we are, both teams have one loss, and now margin for error is a whole lot less for both of these teams at this point in the season. I think both of them are still in good shape in terms of making the postseason, no matter what the outcome is, but it's definitely going to be a lot more difficult than for the team who lost, who's, potentially going to be looking on the outside, looking in, trying to find one of those last few spots.
And we'll talk more about this matchup in a second, but I want to talk about the team for Alabama for a second. Obviously, you lose the game to Vanderbilt, not one you want to drop. Vanderbilt's an improved team this year. You will get the win over South Carolina. It's close. A lot of talk has been on the defense. You're a defensive guy. What have you seen? And I know it's a different defense than what we're used to seeing with Alabama. But what have you seen from this defense, and maybe what are some improvements that we need to see moving forward when it comes to Alabama defensively?
Yeah, I think that Kane Womack's brought a completely different style of defense that just Alabama fans aren't accustomed to seeing. It's a new scheme. And I think that you got to give some of these guys a little bit of a grace. Now we're halfway through the season. You would hope that everybody understands what the defense is supposed to be, making sure that they understand their roles. Because that was always the biggest thing for us with Coach Saban is everybody has a clear and defined role in each individual defense that's called. You've got to do your job so that everybody else can do theirs. And if one piece is out of place, then it really affects the entire defense. So there's plenty of good athletes out there. And we've seen a lot of new faces, lost a lot of guys to the draft last year, especially at the corner position, losing 2 first-rounders. And then, freshman All-American, freshman All-SEC safety transfers out. I'm impressed with what I'm seeing as far as the improvements that have happened from week one, because there's definitely been some inefficiencies and some, guys running open that you don't want to see from the back end of your defense. And then, that Vanderbilt game was a tough one to watch just because we just seemed to be out of place. Guys were not, weren't responsible for their, whatever their role was in that defense to stop that style of an offense. And it requires everybody to be on the same page and know exactly what you're supposed to do. And if you get caught with your feet, kind of concrete feet, when you're facing that kind of an offense, they can expose you, and it happens. So I think going back to the drawing board and making some adjustments and trying to find a way to, now you're facing this Tennessee offense that's going to be completely different from what we saw from Vandy. But we've seen Josh Heupel take advantage of an Alabama defense under Coach Saban, putting 2 receivers stacked outside the numbers for the entire game, really stretching the secondary, getting them out wide, and trying to play, a different style of ball. And we'll see if Kane Womack and Kalen DeBoer and this defense can really draw something up to slow this offensive, this fast-paced, high-powered offense that doesn't look as good as they have in the past couple of years. It seems like they're struggling a little bit throughout this season, but we know what they're capable of, especially with talented quarterback who, has seen a little regression, but don't expect that to happen this Saturday. at home when you've got Alabama coming to town, I guarantee you they're going to be on their P's and Q's and be ready to play.
Alabama offensively, I mean, we knew what kind of quarterback Jalen Milroe was coming into the season. It's a new offense for him too, and what Kalen DeBoer brings. But what has stood out to you so far about the offense for Alabama, and how can they sustain what we've seen so far for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything runs through Jalen Milroe and his legs and his arms. He's a dual threat guy. He's one that's carried us when some things weren't working. If the running game wasn't working or not finding guys open downfield in the passing game, he's got another element of taking off with his feet that is really difficult for a lot of defenses to defend. And but I'm impressed with what we've seen so far. I think the offensive line has improved from week one. Gave up a few too many pressures and sacks over the last couple of weeks, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of growth from the offensive line. The running backs seem to be, we've got two good ones back there, plus a quarterback who can also run.
All right, Cory, when you look at this matchup, Alabama, Tennessee, strengths versus weaknesses, obviously both teams won loss. We mentioned that at the top of this interview. How does that change how both of these teams approach the game? Do you think it changes at all how these two teams approach the games from an X's and O's standpoint with both teams with a loss?
Yeah, I think you probably understand what it means to lose this game, and there's probably a little heightened sense of urgency from both sides of the ball for this game. But the main thing for us is we've got to go out there and execute our game plan, because we've seen what it looks like if we don't. You lose some games, or you look good against South Carolina in the first half for most of it. You're doing the things the right way. And then all of a sudden, 2 minutes right before halftime, you have a bunch of miscues that gets South Carolina right back in the game. You got a 14-0 lead, and then all of a sudden it's 14-12 going into halftime. And that really established a lot of belief and confidence in that South Carolina team that they could compete. And then, you're fighting tooth and nail for the rest of the game to try to hold on to a lead. And I think that's been the biggest thing that we've got to focus on from an Alabama standpoint is we've really got to go out there and make sure that we don't give them a lot of opportunities to stay in the ball game. Let's don't shoot ourselves in the foot. We've got a lot of, unnecessary penalties that have really cost us and allowed teams to continue to be in these games and create these, the outcomes that are a lot closer than they should have been. We've got to be able to take the lead, and then you got to keep these guys down when you have the opportunity. Don't force, self-inflicted wounds, force errors that are, that we control, that allows these teams to stick around. And then as that happens, they just keep building this confidence, and all of a sudden they're believing they can win the ball game. And that changes, then we're playing on our heels a little bit. So we've really got to come out there and make sure that we're buttoned up, doing things the right way, executing the right way. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for this team, not just for this game, but for the rest of the schedule, because it doesn't get any easier after Tennessee either.
For Tennessee, they've got a really good run game led by Dylan Sampson, great running back, and they've got a couple more in there as well. But what can Alabama do defensively to slow down what they do running the football?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to be gap sound. That was the problem for Vanderbilt, is that we didn't have the numbers whichever side of the ball the play was going towards. We just got outmanned. There was just more people that they had to block us than we had to defend. And lanes were created that we didn't have somebody responsible for. You've got to play sound football. Gap integrity is the biggest thing that can hurt this Alabama team. And so we've got to stay on top of that. But I think the biggest thing that this defense can do is really try to dial up some pressures. We saw what we were able to do against Carson Beck in that first half when we were bringing more guys than they can block. He didn't have time to sit back there and really pick apart this defense. And I'm sure they're working on Nico of getting that ball out quickly. But through the first 5 or 6 games this season, you're seeing him hold on to the ball a little bit longer than I'm sure Josh Heupel would like to see from his quarterback. And I think we can affect that as if we can just bring some of this extra pressure, make him get that ball out fast, and then be in position in the secondary to either bat some balls down, get in front of them, create some turnovers, or this defensive line getting their hands up and try to call some incompletions. But shutting the running game is definitely going to be, priority number one if Tennessee's watching the tape of what we've looked like so far. Rock Sanders was a a good running back from South Carolina who was able to hit some holes, and Vanderbilt, we know what happened there. But, that Vandy team took it to Kentucky the very next week after beating us too. I think people are seeing that they're not the Vandy of old. They're a competitive football team. And their bread and butter is running the football. So hopefully we've got a lot of tape that we can go back and try to get corrected, making sure that we're in the positions that we're supposed to be in to close those gaps and make that ball bounce wherever it's supposed to go. Make them run side to side. Don't let them run north and south.
And on the other side of the ball, Tennessee, great pass rush, great defensive line, some really good guys up front, kind of like what you saw last week against South Carolina. They also had a great pass rush. How can Alabama's offense handle what they're going to see again with that defensive line at Tennessee?
Yeah, South Carolina's two edge rushers were probably two of the best that we're going to see all season. You kind of laugh at that, but I do think they're probably the two of the more talented edge rushers that this conference has this season. So, we defended pretty well. We protected Jalen Milroe pretty well. We allowed a few pressures, but those guys are going to have their wins, on the edges and bringing pass rushers. But we can't let some of these guys be running free. And saw last week with the strip sack and the fumble and turning the ball over. So hopefully we've got a game plan where it's kind of the same thing. We can get some hot routes, get this ball out quickly. Don't sit back there and try to hold on it for too long, because they're going to get home and you better be prepared for it. But this offensive line has done a great job of protecting him. And then when he feels that pressure, using those legs to escape and extend plays and do what he does best. I mean, it's something that's worked for him all season this year and last year. So these receivers are going to have a lot of opportunities, it feels like, for some jump balls. And Germie Bernard is a guy that's really stepped up now that a lot of focus is on Ryan Williams, and he's making the most of it. You got plenty of weapons at the tight end, wide receiver position groups that go out there and really compete well for these footballs. They come down with them more than they don't. And I liked what I saw last week of getting the tight end involved, really trying to expose the middle of the field. And I expect more of that this weekend against Tennessee.
You've played in Neyland Stadium. Last time Alabama was there, I mean, it was a loud, raucous environment. Tennessee won the game on a field goal. What's it like playing in that stadium? And does that stadium kind of bring something extra for Tennessee?
I mean, it's home field advantage on the road, and the SEC is some of the toughest football that you can get, especially when you go to a place like Neyland Stadium. Their fans show up, they're loud, they're trying to enjoy this run and this kind of turnaround for this program that they've had after getting beat by Alabama for, what was it, 15 plus years, and they're excited about what Josh Heupel's doing and the way that this program is trending. And knowing what it means to beat Alabama, especially with new coaching staff, Saban's no longer there. Teams seem to have a little chip on their shoulder to go out there and try to take advantage of these games. I imagine this is going to be, it always is. It's one of the loudest places that you play in. It's a great environment for a football game. Unfortunately, it's, a lot of noise for in the wrong direction for us, but you got to understand that we've had these guys have all played in tough environments. Communication is going to be the key. Making sure that you don't jump off sides, like we talked about a minute ago. Don't shoot ourselves in the foot. But communication, understanding, going on silent snap counts, all the tricks that you've got to have to make sure that you're on the same page, and don't let those external factors affect you where the noise is really getting in your head. And I think that game a couple years ago were a ton of offsides, false starts, backing ourselves up, putting us in longer first and second down situations that are just going to be difficult to convert. And you don't want to see your punt team running out there, after you've had a couple of penalties that have backed you up, and you're putting the defense back on the field. We've got to put some sustained drives together and try to quiet this crowd as early as we possibly can.
All right, Cory, you got a pick for a game and kind of how it plays out?
Man, I think this is going to be more of the shootout that we had a couple of years ago. I don't think that it's going to be necessarily, one of these high, Alabama has won a lot of games and scored a lot of points, and that's how we've won games this year. But I really feel like this is going to be a little bit more of a defensive battle than we've seen in the past. And it's kind of just because, everybody expects both of these offenses to just go out there and put 40, 50 points on the board. With the game on the line and everybody playing a little tight, knowing, how much this game means at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if it's more of a, what we saw last week, 21-14, 21-17, lower scoring game. And I'm feeling that way. I'm leaning that way. But, with both of these teams, it could also turn pretty quickly, and we can see a lot of offensive weapons, a lot of firepower going on in this one for sure. It could be another 51-49 type situation. I hope it's not. Hopefully these defenses, especially the Alabama defense, get some things together and play some clean football this weekend and is able to shut those guys down.
Well, should be fun on the third Saturday in October. Cory Reamer, former linebacker for the Crimson Tide. Cory, appreciate you coming on, talking some Alabama football with us today.
Hey, Chase, appreciate you, man. Roll Tide.
Absolutely. That's Cory Reamer. We are Southeastern 16. We're brought to you by BetOnline.